Alright, let's give this a human touch. Here, that section rewritten to sound more like us, $90 million, that's the big number, right? But behind that kind of mind-boggling amount, it's not just about stealing money, it's a real gut punch to the folks who need help the most. I'm your host, and honestly, I've spent years digging into the shady underbelly of financial crime. What you don't always see in the news about this story is how a system that was supposed to help people get sick twisted into a cash cow for fancy living. Plus, how a crisis right here in America actually turned into a real estate party on another continent. So stick with me in this video or so. You're gonna find out how $90 million, money that was supposed to go to kids with autism, just vanished from Minnesota. You'll see how that cash allegedly bought up mansions in Kenya, and you'll hear from the families left high and dry while the folks accused of doing this were living it up. Just a heads up, some names you'll hear in this documentary, we've changed M to keep people's privacy. The main stuff, the actual events and facts though, that's all based on public records and thorough reporting. It all starts with a simple promise. A promise of actual care, of real support for kids diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. In Minnesota, that promise was supposed to be paid for by taxpayers, handled through Medicaid, and trusted to healthcare providers. But man, did things go sideways. Picture this, small, unassuming clinics out in the Minneapolis suburbs, places where parents were just hoping to find some help for their kids. Now flip that image completely, think lush, fancy mansions baking under the Kenyan sun, a whole different world right far away from the families back home who were really struggling. This ain't just some run-of-the-mill embezzlement story, this is allegedly healthcare fraud on a massive scale. A whole scheme that prosecutors say nabbed over $90 million from a program meant for vulnerable kids. This is way bigger than just numbers on a page. It's about the real heavy impact on actual lives. Parents like Sarah and Mark, whose kids were diagnosed and desperately needed services, they got totally hung out to dry. They were told their kids qualified, that help was coming, but the services, either they never showed up, only half delivered, or they were suddenly declared not medically necessary by the very people supposed to be helping. They told us our kids were getting therapy, Sarah says, her voice sounding really worn out. We believed them. We signed everything, and then poof. Just excuses, Mark chimes in. It felt like getting sucker punched. Not only were we not getting what our son needed, but we were being flat out lied to, and our tax money was being stolen blind. The sheer nerve of this alleged operation, it's unbelievable. 15 people have been slapped with charges, accused of running this huge, tangled web of lies. Their alleged game plan, filing fake claims for autism treatment services that, get this, were never even given. This wasn't just a few bad actors, this was apparently a slick, big-time setup designed to rip off Minnesota's Medicaid program. The heart of the alleged scam, according to the feds prosecuting this, really boiled down to two main outfits: advanced care and autism outreach. These companies were apparently the main channels for millions of dollars in bogus claims. And that money, prosecutors claim, wasn't just stashed away, it was laundered. The path of that dirty money supposedly stretched way beyond Minnesota's state lines. Investigators uncovered this crazy maze of shell companies, a clear attempt to hide where the money came from. And where did all this cash eventually pop up? All the way on the other side of the planet in Kenya. From what we're seeing, the cash from this alleged fraud was used to buy fancy cars, houses, and a whole lot of property in Kenya. Just imagine it, while families in Minnesota were struggling to get basic autism services, millions of dollars, supposedly stolen from them, were being sunk into prime real estate in Nairobi. This is exactly the kind of crime that totally destroys public trust, as FBI Minneapolis Special Agent in Charge Alvin M. Winston Sr. put it, healthcare fraud is a serious crime that impacts every taxpayer. In this scheme, he stressed, allegedly siphoned millions of dollars from a program designed to help vulnerable children. It's honestly hard to wrap your head around the sheer size of this alleged deception. $90 million. That's not just a number, it represents countless hours of therapy that never happened, crucial developmental support that was missed, and specialized care that was promised but never delivered. It's money that could have genuinely changed the lives of kids and offered some relief to their families. Instead, prosecutors argue it got rerouted. Rerouted through this complicated money system, set up specifically to wash the cash and hide its illegal beginnings. The final stop, according to the accusations, was buying up assets in Kenya. Think about the sheer effort it must have taken. Moving that much money around, setting up fake companies, buying property in another country, this wasn't some amateur hour thing. This screams of a planned, deliberate effort to exploit a system and make individuals rich, leaving behind a mess of broken promises. The ripple effects here are huge. You've got the direct victims, the families who didn't get the care they were promised. But you also have the taxpayers who funded the program, only to allegedly see their money end up in overseas assets. This whole investigation is about pulling back the curtain on this alleged $90 million autism scam. We're gonna dive deep into how this intricate network apparently operated, check out the alleged money laundering tricks, and follow the money from Minnesota's clinics all the way to Nairobi's mansions. The stakes couldn't be higher. For the families still waiting for the help they were promised, for the taxpayers who picked up the tab, and for the very integrity of the healthcare system. This isn't just a story about stealing money, it's a story about fighting for justice. We'll be talking to legal pros, digging into the evidence, and trying to figure out the full picture of this alleged international mess. How could $90 million just vanish? And what does it say about a system that apparently allowed such a massive betrayal to happen? Our journey to uncover the truth about this $90 million autism scam kicks off right now. It's a road trip that takes us from the heart of Minnesota's healthcare system to the fancy vibes of Kenya, exposing this alleged web of fraud that's left a massive, devastating mark. This is way more than just a financial crime. It feels like a huge ethical breakdown. A system designed to give critical support to kids with autism was apparently twisted into a tool for getting personally loaded on a global scale. The evidence laid out by the Department of Justice and the FBI, it paints a pretty grim picture. 15 people charged, accusations of sending in fake bills for services never done, and a jaw-dropping $90 million allegedly funneled right out of the state. The contrast is just wild. On one side, you've got the desperate need for autism services in Minnesota, families desperately trying to get support for their kids. On the other side, the alleged buying of super expensive properties in Kenya. That's the heart of the alleged scam, basically using a critical need as a stepping stone for personal gain, supercharged by fancy money laundering tactics. Our mission here is to untangle this whole complicated mess. To figure out how such a massive fraud could even happen, how the money was allegedly laundered, and what the real consequences are for everyone involved. Especially those kids who were supposed to benefit, not become the victims of this whole system. We're just getting started on this $90 million autism scam investigation, and honestly, what we're finding is pretty shocking. Stick around as we try to expose the alleged truth behind all those headlines. Alright, let's give this a little human touch, shall we? Here's that section, rewritten to sound a bit more like us, while keeping all the nitty-gritty details and those beat markers intact. You know, the shiny surface of healthcare can sometimes hide some pretty rotten stuff. And in Minnesota, this rottenness popped up as a massive $90 million scam. A total ripoff targeting a program meant to help kids with autism. 15 people got caught in the middle of this super brazen fraud, hit with charges for allegedly stealing millions from the state's Medicaid program. Seriously, the size of this thing is just wild. Prosecutors are saying over $90 million was pocketed through fake claims for autism treatment. So how'd they do it? It all went down through two main outfits, advanced care and autism outreach. These weren't actual places folks got help, they were just fronts, you know. The way they pulled it off was disturbingly simple, but man, did it work. They just flooded the system with bogus bills. They billed for services that never happened. They stretched out legitimate therapy hours, turning real care into made-up appointments. And get this, they even claimed treatments were necessary or supposedly happened when they totally didn't, all to rack up insane charges. Just think about the nerve of it all. Picture parents really needing help for their kids, trusting these supposed clinics only to have their children's treatments become the very thing used to rip them off. The evidence, it's pretty grim. Investigators found a whole trail of fake invoices, patient records that were twisted and turned to look like services were given when they weren't. And suspicious bank deposits, they totally showed how the money was being moved around illegally. This wasn't just a few bad apples, this was a planned, big-time operation designed purely to make a ton of cash. The FBI Minneapolis special agent in charge, Alvin M. Winston SR, laid it out super clearly, saying, "Healthcare fraud is a serious crime that impacts every taxpayer. This scheme allegedly siphoned millions of dollars from a program designed to help vulnerable children." And yeah, that statement hits the nail on the head. It wasn't just about the money, it was a betrayal of trust and stealing from people who really needed it. So how does a scam this huge go on for so long without anyone noticing? That's the big question, and it really points to some serious screw-ups in how things were overseen and regulated. Folks who know healthcare regulations and audits point out the big holes that let this thing fester. You've got this massive flood of claims going into programs like Medicaid, and managing it all is a huge headache. When you add potentially not-so-great auditing checks to that mountain of paperwork, you can end up with blind spots. In that kind of situation, super sneaky schemes can easily slip through the cracks, especially when they're built from the ground up to hide what they're really doing. But that money, it didn't just disappear into thin air. The cash from this elaborate scam, after being laundered, was allegedly used to buy fancy cars, houses, and other properties. And a big chunk of these dirty earnings allegedly ended up way across the ocean in Kenya. That's where things get really interesting, with a complicated money trail stretching from the middle of America all the way to East Africa. They reportedly used shell companies to cover up where the money originally came from, which is a pretty common trick in these huge financial crimes. The fact that the money ended up as properties in Kenya suggests they really worked hard to move and hide those stolen millions. The Star Tribune reported that prosecutors said the money was laundered through shell companies and then used to buy these overseas assets. Source: Star Tribune. This whole international angle just adds another layer of difficulty to the investigation and any prosecutions. And the U.S. Department of Justice confirmed it. 15 people were charged for their parts in this giant scheme. Source: DOJ. The sheer amount allegedly embezzled and how far the laundered money reached internationally really shows how serious this healthcare fraud is. The whole point of the program to give essential help to kids with autism got twisted into a personal cash machine for the people running this whole deception. The very trust we place in our healthcare system. Yeah, it took a serious hit from this incredibly bold act. Source: FBI. Now dig this, the investigation really started digging, and what they found wasn't just some local fraud in Minnesota, nope. It turned out to be a whole, super organized international operation. We're talking millions upon millions of dollars, money that was supposed to be helping kids in need being swept up, laundered, and then shipped off halfway across the world. Yeah, the money trail, it pointed straight to Kenya. Prosecutors are saying the dirty money was used to snag fancy cars, houses, and just tons of property. Can you even picture it? Like these super-rich mansions and huge tracts of land in fancy Kenyan spots, all bought with cash meant for caring for kids with autism. Wild, right? And get this, we actually got our hands on some exclusive aerial and ground video of these massive estates. You see these huge, perfectly kept compounds, and it's such a stark contrast to the really awful situation at the core of this whole thing. Meanwhile, back in Minnesota, the very same clinics that were supposed to be helping these kids, well, they were allegedly cutting corners or maybe not even doing the work at all. The masterminds behind this whole elaborate con, they weren't just sitting back and collecting checks. Oh no, they were the ones calling the shots. Now, pinning down exact names other than the folks already charged is tricky because of all the fake companies they used. But the main crew, they say, included people who were apparently pretty close, family and friends and all that. They supposedly cooked up this whole system to just keep submitting fake bills, pretending they did services that never happened or were only half done or just totally unnecessary. We're told there were two main outfits called Advanced Care and Autism Outreach that were apparently the main channels for these fake claims. Source: Star Tribune. But the cash, it didn't just sit there. It allegedly got passed around through a whole tangle of shell corporations. It's a pretty common trick, honestly, to hide where the bad money came from before you go spending it all fancy-like or investing it somewhere far away. The FBI, they straight up called this a large-scale scheme to defraud Minnesota's Medicaid program of over $90 million. Source: DOJ. This wasn't some accidental screw-up, no way. This was planned, calculated, and aimed at ripping off a system that's actually supposed to look out for the most vulnerable people. Think about what that stolen money represents. Tons and tons of therapy sessions, super important developmental help, and just plain hope for families trying their best to take care of their kids. Our crew, we tried reaching out to a bunch of folks who seemed like they were right in the middle of this whole operation, including some who apparently had ties to those big properties in Kenya. And what happened? Silence, or they dodged us, or they just flat out refused to say anything. You know, in situations like this, the silence can sometimes be louder than any words. This whole network, they were operating with this really unnerving efficiency, just draining millions from a healthcare program that's absolutely critical. All the signs point to a coordinated effort, a deliberate move to take money meant for kids right here in America and send it to fancy lifestyles and properties way over on the other side of the world. Honestly, the sheer scope of this alleged deception, it's mind-boggling. And the fallout, it's going to hit taxpayers hard, and most importantly, it's going to deeply affect those kids who missed out on the help they desperately needed. Alright, so this whole $90 million autism fraud thing. It's way bigger than just what happens in court, you know. For the families who absolutely need these services, and I mean they're critical, this whole mess really erodes their faith in a healthcare system that's supposed to be there for them. It's a tough pill to swallow. The sheer size of this scam, it leaves a really deep mark, and honestly it screams that we need some serious changes to stop this kind of ripoff from happening again. You can bet there are some hard lessons being learned here. Our government folks, the agencies and the people who make the rules, they really need to step up their game with watching things and catching bad actors. This means looking into stuff like using AI to spot weird billing habits and honestly just doing way more frequent and thorough checks. It's also super important, crucial, that countries work together to track down and get back money, like those properties they're saying were bought in Kenya. We can't let these criminals just get away with it and profit from their lies. So as of right now, 15 people have been hit with charges for supposedly being part of this huge fraud. The prosecutors are saying the money got cleaned through fake companies, with millions ending up in fancy cars and properties overseas. The FBI's been pretty clear about this. When healthcare fraud happens, it hits all of us taxpayers because it steals money that should be going to kids who really need it. This whole situation. It's a really important wake-up call about where our healthcare system can be weak. We gotta push for more openness, make sure people are held responsible, and put solid safeguards in place to stop this stuff before it starts. That's the only way we can even start to fix the trust issue.